Wage shock, the wage hike no one can afford. Flint West reporting from the macro frontier. You've seen the headlines. Minimum wage going up in 22 states. Biggest raise for low-wage workers in years. Finally, some progress. Cue the applause. Cue the think pieces. Cue the politicians racing to claim credit like it's a pie at a town hall. But let's hit pause on the theater and slow it down, frame by frame. Because what you're watching ain't magic, ain't justice. It's math. These wage hikes, they didn't come from some sudden burst of compassion in Congress. They were already scheduled, quietly passed, tied to inflation, or bundled into multi-year cost of living plans years ago. In Washington, District of Columbia, for example, the minimum wage just went from $17.50 to $17.95. That's not a revolution. That's a 45-cent inflation adjustment. Routine, automatic, boring. Same thing in California, Oregon, and New York. These weren't fresh miracles. They were paper promises waiting to be realized. But here's the twist nobody talks about. The laws were already there. But labor scarcity is what made them real. Because when the border was open and the labor supply was infinite, those wage hikes, they were mostly symbolic. Employers could hire off the books, offshore the job, or automate the task. Wage floors didn't bite because there was always someone willing to work for less. But then something changed. The border tightened, deportation surged, the labor pipeline dried up, and suddenly, employers didn't have options. They couldn't swap out workers like batteries. They couldn't ignore wage mandates without risking operational collapse. So for the first time in decades, minimum wage law went from ink on paper to real-world leverage. But here's the part the feel-good headlines forgot to include. Scarcity gave the wage hikes teeth, but the bite is only beginning. Because now we're entering the second phase, the part where math catches up and everyone pays. Let's break it down. Businesses can't absorb the cost. A 40% to 100% increase in labor cost in some states, that's not a bump, that's a cliff. Especially in states still clinging to $7.25 per hour, now forced to compete with regions paying $15 to $17.50. Prices will rise. You want a burger? It's not $5 anymore. Try $9. A haircut? Double the rate. Local childcare? Forget it. Automation accelerates. When labor costs double, the robot starts to look like a bargain. Small businesses crumble. Big box stores like Walmart survive. Your neighborhood bakery doesn't. U.S. exports lose global footing. American labor just got more expensive. China, Vietnam, and Mexico, they're licking their chops. And that's before the Federal Reserve gets spooked by the inflation spike and hits the brakes with another round of interest rate hikes. It's a loop. Wage hike leads to price hike. Price hike leads to demand for higher wages. Higher wages lead to more inflation. Inflation leads to interest rate hikes. Interest rate hikes lead to job cuts. We've seen this movie before. It's the 1970s with a tech wrapper, stagflation in the age of smartphones. Here's the uncomfortable truth. You don't create prosperity by declaring a number. You create it by building capacity, by increasing productivity, by coordinating systems that actually work across states, supply chains, and global markets. Instead, we brute forced a feel-good policy across a fragmented nation. Half the country still operates at $7.25 per hour. The other half is pushing $17.50 per hour. That's not justice. That's a policy time bomb. So the next time someone tells you this wage hike is a sign of progress, ask them, progress for who? For the laid-off worker? For the shuttered small business? For the consumer now paying $11 for eggs? Because this wasn't a raise. This was a reckoning, a collision of labor scarcity, broken federal coordination, and economic fragility. We didn't lift wages. We triggered a chain reaction. Flint West, reporting from the macro frontier, where wage hikes don't solve inflation. They trigger it, and the check is about to come due.